Hi. My name is Tom, and I reside near the Devil's final resting place. That's what locals call our town's cemetery. Before I tell you why the cemetery is called that, let me tell you a little about myself. I work as its groundskeeper and also reside there. Well, not quite inside the cemetery. Our house and yard are separated from the rest of the cemetery by a 4-foot fence. My great-grandfather used to own the land. It is quite large. The city offered to buy it from him, but he was hesitant to move. So he struck a deal with them. The family will stay on a section of the property and maintain the cemetery for free, but they will not pay property taxes. In exchange, my great-grandfather would donate the land to the community. The agreement was reached. Since then, our family has lived in there. To be honest, I'm not sure what my great-grandfather was thinking. We can't sell the house or the plot on which it sits because no one wants to live so close to a cemetery. Especially not near the Devil's final resting place. My father tried to sell it once but was unsuccessful, and the town was not interested in extending the cemetery. It is because funerals are so expensive these days. People are choosing cremation instead. Aside from our inability to sell our property, strange and terrifying occurrences happen there. I am now in my early 70s. I've never married and don't have any children. Teddy and Bear, my 2 German Shepherd dogs, are my roommates. My niece named them when they were puppies. I didn't want to change the names because I thought they were cool dog names. Teddy and Bear keep me company and serve as excellent guard dogs. I had spent the majority of my life working on a local farm before retiring. In addition, I have done handyman work for locals and continue to do so on occasion. The cemetery's responsibilities include grass cutting, greenery maintenance, trash removal, and cleaning old headstones, among other things. The majority of the work is done from spring to mid-autumn. The town has hired a few more people to assist me. Regardless, I continue to care for the cemetery to the best of my ability. The cemetery is divided into 8 burial sections, each divided by a paved path leading to the center. It is usually peaceful and very beautiful. If one could describe a cemetery in this manner. In the middle of the cemetery is sign showing the name of the cemetery and its map. Right next to it is a fountain and hydrangea bushes. There are trees scattered throughout the cemetery too. Every day, people visit the graves of their loved ones. People have left food offerings, toys, religious icons, flowers, and other items, among other things. I occasionally come across people performing rituals in the cemetery and am forced to clean up some unusual items. Because I work and live there, I sometimes attend funerals and learn about different customs. One day, there was a funeral and the city asked me to attend. A new grave was dug in a new burial section to be the first in the lot. I made certain that the area was clean both before and after the grave was dug. It was a hasty burial. The funeral director, myself, and some other grounds crew members were the only ones present. A grave marker had been inserted into the ground. Charles R. Stern's name was written on it. I had never met anyone with that name. There was no priest or pastor present, nor were there any relatives or friends. I assumed he was single or lived out of state. Sometimes people leave town and never return, except in a coffin. After the funeral, I prayed for Mr. Stearns and moved on with my business. A few days later, I noticed something strange. A flock of ravens circled the grave a few feet away from it, making noise as if disturbed by something. They didn't flee when I approached. Then I noticed a few dead ravens on Stern's grave. They appeared to be half burned, and there was an unpleasant odor. I put my hand over my mouth and cleaned up the mess. Not long after, Stern's grave experienced a major soil collapse. I was completely perplexed because the ground was in good condition, there was no soil corrosion, and there had been no major flooding. The cement capsule's top was cracked and exposed. I called the city's cemetery manager and left a message to let them know what I discovered. I told them I'd fixed the crack before covering up the grave again, which I did. But this was not the end of Stern's grave disturbances. My dogs refused to approach the grave and appeared terrified of it. The grave had a foul odor coming from it. to stand near it, one must wear a mask. Furthermore, animals that approach it frequently die right on the grave. Though I don't see any new cracks on the capsule's lid, the topsoil appears to collapse frequently. When it snows, the snow on the grave melts. We planted grass, but it didn't grow. One would assume the topsoil of the grave is warm for some reason, but when I touch it, it is not. I'd never seen anything like it before. I've never heard anything similar happening from my father or relatives who worked in the cemetery. My curiosity was piqued, so I decided to look up Charles R. Stearns. I also wanted to know why there are so many issues with the grave in question. I consider myself to be a rational person. I am always on the lookout for logical explanations for things. So my initial investigation focused on possible underground activities that could release gases. So far, I've discovered information on landfill gases. According to reports, landfill gases can be toxic at dangerous levels or if the gases migrate elsewhere. Would a grave produce such high levels of toxic gases? There is no landfill in the vicinity of the cemetery. I don't have a satisfactory answer. Concerning the collapsing soil, I investigated whether it corresponded to weather activities other than rain. According to my research, high winds can cause trees to sway, causing the roots to move, resulting in the soil to move. A tree is about 15 feet away from the grave. So I kept track of windy days and the opening of the grave soil. I couldn't find any link between the two. After some time, I discovered that Mr. Stearns was a murderer. He was on death row for multiple homicides committed outside of the state. His final wish was to be buried in his grandfather's hometown. A young pregnant woman was one of his victims. According to one of the articles I read, the victim's mother wept in court. In anguish, she yelled at the murderer, "May you burn in hell. You devil, may you burn in hell. May the Satan himself torture you in your grave. Call me crazy, but I've been wondering if the mother's curse is being fulfilled." The town has since posted a warning sign near the grave. They also installed metal posts at each corner of the grave, followed by protective wire to keep animals from stepping on it. Strange occurrences continue to occur, and people have shared frightening stories about Stearns' grave. When I was standing close to it, I personally heard guttural sounds. My dogs would not accompany me to the burial section where the grave is located. Others have reported seeing an apparition of a man with chains around his wrists and ankles. Some people believe the grave is cursed and will not walk near it. The Stearns grave was eventually renamed the Devil's Grave and continues to draw both locals and tourists, particularly during the Halloween season. We have had other burials since, but so far no one wants to be buried next to the Devil's Grave. It's a shame because the area where the grave is located is actually quite pleasant and sunny. The Devil's Grave gained even more bad reputation after paranormal researchers and Satanists began visiting it. The latter would perform black masses near the grave, attracting media attention. It made me uneasy to live in my house knowing that black masses were being held nearby. Furthermore, the Satanists would occasionally perform animal sacrifices and leave trash for me and the grounds crew to clean up. They erected a statue of Baphomet to serve as a headstone of the Devil's Grave. When a paranormal researcher was killed while camping near the Devil's Grave last October, things spiraled out of control. He had a slit throat and burn marks on his hands and face. I was the one who found his body. There was a thorough investigation, but the case remains unsolved. The police interrogated everyone who works at the cemetery, including me. But other than what I saw, I couldn't give them much information. I recall that I saw the researcher camp near the grave. When I told him it wasn't a good idea and explained why, he showed me the town's official letter of permission to camp overnight at the cemetery. I offered him a room in my house, but he refused because he wanted to see any paranormal activity at the Devil's Grave. I said goodnight to him and went about my business. Nothing came to my attention. That night I didn't hear anything. But when I found the dead researcher the next day, I recognized the foul odor. He had the same odor that could be detected from the grave. And the burns on his body made me suspicious. I honestly believe that the guy's death was caused by the Devil's Grave. I told the cops, but they didn't believe me. Regardless, I started taking precautions after this murder. Who knows what else may happen? I hung a crucifix at each entrance to my house and started wearing a cross. I eventually began to notice paranormal activity in my home. At night, I would hear footsteps around my house. Doors would open and close by themselves. When I go to sleep, I can even hear someone breathing next to me. My dogs stopped barking and went into hiding. It's uncharacteristic of them. I was raised Catholic, so I naturally sought the advice of a local Catholic priest. He told me what prayers to say and offered to bless the house. This seemed like it would be beneficial and I agreed. It helped a little at first. My dogs were also at ease sleeping next to me. I even slept well for the first time in a while. But the calm didn't last long. A dog's yelp woke me up one evening at 3 a.m. I leapt out of bed. Bear was whining and hiding beneath the dining table. He was visibly shaking. Teddy was nowhere to be found in the house. I grabbed my jacket and flashlight and dashed outside. Teddy! I summoned him. But nothing happened. Then I noticed what appeared to be a glimmering flame in the distance. A chill went down my spine. My heart was pounding so loudly. Despite the fact that it was a cold night, my hands were sweaty. Fearful, I walked slowly up to the devil's grave. It appeared to have a dying bonfire on it. Teddy, my beautiful friend, was dead. His back legs and torso appeared to be charred. There was a familiar odor. I burst out crying and dashed back to the house. I started reciting prayers aloud. As I did so, doors began to open and slam. Bear came running up to me when I called him. I quickly bagged some of my belongings, grabbed Bear, and dashed out to my truck. I noticed lights flickering in my house in my rearview mirror. I drove as quickly as I could. That night, Bear and I slept in my truck. Then we stayed with my brother for a while until I found a dog-friendly apartment. Bear and I miss Teddy very much. But I'm glad I was able to save Bear and myself. According to reports, frightening things continue to occur at the devil's final resting place. I have no intention of returning to my house. My brother and I told the cemetery manager about our situation and offered to sell the land for a few $1,000s. They agreed to it. The city allegedly intends to demolish the house and replace it with a burial site. But they don't plan to relocate the devil's grave.
Thank you for listening. Stay tuned for more weekly content. Please like and subscribe.